Alors bonjour à toutes et à tous, merci d'être avec nous ce matin. Je me présente, Myriam Achard, je suis chef des partenariats nouveaux médias et des relations publiques chez FI et je serai votre maître de cérémonie. Nous sommes heureux d'accueillir ce matin Alvin Graylin dans le cadre de la sortie de son livre Our Next Reality. Alvin est un pionnier du monde des technologies, il est le Global VP of Corporate Development chez HTC. Et par la suite, nous aurons un panel avec des invités prestigieux. Je serai de retour pour vous les présenter. Alvin, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for coming so early with the snow and the rain and all the other issues. So I'm very impressed that the folks in Montreal are able to get to an early morning and be on time. And thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody, for organizing this amazing event, this great venue. So I will try to. I don't know if I'm going to make 15 minutes, by the way. So, but I will try to speak quickly. I guess today I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what things are going to happen in the next 10 years. And I think we're in a very precarious time, actually, in the history of not just technology, but of humanity. Right? And it's because of the technology is really converging at a very unique time, whereas it has a potential to do both good and bad. So there's a lot of clarity in terms of where the reality is today and where it's headed. So, a lot of this talk will be based on the book that I am writing, and it's coming out in 2 weeks. So as you probably see, Neil Stephenson is he's the guy who coined the word metaverse. And unfortunately, the metaverse right now, and he wrote the foreword, unfortunately, the metaverse is a bad word right now. But a year and a half ago when we started figuring out the name, we still figured out it's probably better to keep it because the term itself may be a bad word, but the concept behind it is going to actually happen, and it's going to happen in a big way, right? No matter what some companies have done with the term. I guess with reality, it's always going to be two sides. And this book is structured in a way where we give both the positive and the negative outcomes of what technology is going to bring. So this is kind of a unique format because most books you see out there about AI or metaverse, whatever, it's always going to be super hype or it's going to be super doomer. And the reality is never one or the other. Right. So we wanted to make sure that, so Louis and I are both people that's been in this space for over 3 decades, both in AI and XR. And so we're talking from experience, and we're also not trying to sell anybody something, right? I think that's the other thing. A lot of these people who are writing books are trying to sell you something, so they're a little bit conflicted. I'm not going to go through all the topics, but here are some of the key questions that we're trying to answer with this book. Everything from kind of what's happening now with the technology to specific industry impacts, and then the last third of the book is really more forward-looking of how the economy is going to change, how education is going to change, how is the geopolitics going to change, right? So hopefully there's something in there for everybody. Now, I hope that we can start to move beyond a 2D screen model, because you hear about the black mirror, and the black mirror essentially is your phone or your laptop turned off, right? So we need to get and open the door into a 3D space. So this is where we're going. Now, every technology is a double-edged sword, as we said before, but I actually don't think the sword is the right metaphor, because a sword has either a good edge or a bad edge. Actually, the proper symbol is actually the Taoist symbol, right? The yin-yang symbol, because in the worst of worst, there's still some bright, and in the brightest of bright, there's still some darkness. And that's really what we will end up with these technologies. We're not going to get to utopia, and we're not going to get to dystopia, right? So the question is, what can we do to lean it towards the positive? Now, the term metaverse, it's very associated with dystopian stories. And a lot of people are saying, oh, man, look at what happened with Horizon World. This is not real. It's not going to happen. I actually think it's the opposite, is that the metaverse, not only will it happen, it's inevitable that it will happen. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll also agree with me. Now, there's been some discussion about what is the metaverse, right? I think that the problem with a lot of the metaverse, everybody has a different definition, and some of them have a half-page long definition. So I wanted to create something very simple. So essentially, the easy way to think about it is that it is the internet that we've been building for the last 3 decades, but the 3D version of that. And then it's powered by AI, so that the technology's a lot more alive than it's ever been before. And it's a lot easier now to create the content than it's ever been before. And it will be long-term interface through XR. In the near term, actually, a lot of people will still use 2D technologies to interface with it. So this is, that was me and Neil about a year ago at the launch of our product. So why do I think 3D is the future? Is because if you look at how technology has progressed over the last 100 years, it continues to progress content together with the devices, right? And as devices add new dimensions, new interactivity, so does the content. And now that we are at a point where we have, devices like this, or like this, which it's becoming much more acceptable and much more affordable. We are also moving towards a much more natural interface for working with the content, just like in the real world. Because we evolved to be, I guess, efficient in a 3D space. So these devices allow us to interact in that 3D space, which is not what has been the case. We've been using keyboards and mouse and touchscreens, which are not really the most efficient way or natural way for us to interface. We should be using our hands, our eyes, our bodies, our brains maybe, to interface with content, just like we do in the real world. So we are getting to a point where we will be moving into that space very soon. Now, if you look at screens over the last 100 years, it continually, every few decades, we add a screen. 120 years ago, we had no screens. And then we've been adding a screen to our life every few decades. At this rate, you would think in another 10 years, 20 years, we're going to have 24 screens. The reality is that it's going to go completely backwards. We're going to start to replace all the screens that we've been creating with screens that are virtual in a device on our face, right? So, the first one probably to be replaced might be in a tablet type, and then it will go into PC. And probably the last one before we start putting stuff into our heads is probably the location-based. So I'm really glad we have Fabian and Paul here from that industry to do the panel later. Because I really think that there's a lot of things that can be done in location-based, managed, curated environments that cannot be done at home. Right? So devices are becoming also much more multimodal. Right? Before it was just either AR or VR devices. Now they're all mixed reality devices. Every device now can do pass-through, see-through, can do interactive, can do immersive. The prices are maybe still a little bit out of the reach for some people, but they're definitely coming down. And they're also going to get much smaller. Right? So let's talk a little bit about AI. That's kind of the term that's been in the press a lot. So, and there's always a little discussion of, is AI or AGI attainable? Is that something that's real, or is it just a fad? Is it going to go away? Is there going to be another winter? Because, I've been in this space for 30 years. I've seen multiple ups and downs of both of these technologies. But I think there's one thing that I do I guess want to say is that these two technologies actually are super complementary. They work together and they solve each other's problems, right? Without AI, I don't think the metaverse would be achievable. But with AI and all the things, I'm not going to go through all the list, but essentially every component of making the metaverse or immersive worlds or interconnected immersive worlds work requires AI. And we're getting to that point where it's definitely a lot more mature than it used to be. So when people talk about AI these days, particularly non-technology people, they think it's just about the chatbots, right? ChatGPT, that's an AI. I mean, as we all know, folks that are in the industry, it's been around a long time, right? For 60, 70 years, we've been working on artificial intelligence. And we're now had music and art and videos that are being created. Just last week, I'm sure some of you guys saw what's happening with Sora and text to video, right? Very soon, we're going to have text to 3D worlds. I think that trend is going to allow us to make content long-term for essentially zero cost or trending towards zero cost. That will solve, I think, the biggest issue right now that's keeping XR devices from being acceptable, is that there's not enough content. There's not enough quality content that will keep with you. Whether you're talking about our HTC devices or Meta devices or whoever, Samsung devices, after a few months, a lot of people, probably more than half, put them into a drawer and they don't take it out hardly ever because they run out of content. But when content becomes essentially free, that changes everything, right? And if you look at how AI has progressed in the last few years, a lot of it has just been putting text content into these virtual brains. And it's already being able to be so amazing, right? I mean, you can write poetry, you can code software, you can do, review books, and etc. Just from having text content. We're going to get to a world where we start putting multimodal content into these virtual brains, allowing them to have sight, allowing them to have ears, allowing these, virtual brains to have all the senses that we have as a sentient being. So just imagine what's possible in the next phase. Now, I just said the word sentience, and that is something that is a little bit controversial because people are saying, oh, machine can never be sentient. There's no consciousness. They're just parrots. They're just stochastic parrots. I probably would beg to differ a little bit, but I do want to give a little perspective. And I made this chart, I think, that helps to kind of explain the idea a little bit. First of all, I don't think consciousness is a point, right? Because a lot of people say consciousness is when they can become like humans in terms of understanding their place in the universe. The reality is that there's different levels of it based on the maturity of the brain, right? And even the bacteria has some sense of its surroundings. It reacts to its surroundings. Ant can communicate and have a group think, right? A bat, I'm sure you talked about what is it like to be a bat, right? Different philosophers have different ideas. Some will say, hey, it's once you have a self-awareness, then you have consciousness. So a chimp qualifies, and of course, at some point we get to the human level of consciousness. Now, if you go back to traditional AI, more procedural, expert systems, narrow systems, they don't really have consciousness. But as you start moving into where we are today with these large multimodal models, frontier models, there is that hint of consciousness that is coming out, and there are multiple papers that seem to be pointing to that. We will get to the point where we get to AGI, where you're human level intelligence and higher level consciousness. But AGI doesn't necessarily mean human level consciousness. Strong AI, supposedly, I guess depending on whose definition you use, it should get us to both human AI consciousness and human level intelligence. Now, it may still not be as strong as humanity as a group, right? But that also will get surpassed in some point in the future, and it probably faster than most people think, because once we get to AGI, it will be self-learning. And if it's self-learning, the level of progress that will happen will be on the order of days or months, not in the order of years or decades. But the beauty is that hopefully this technology also brings us a little bit higher in that plane as well, right? I don't think we'll ever be able to process things at the speeds of semiconductors, but it should elevate the entire consciousness as well as the entire level of intelligence of all of us. The scary part is actually in the middle, right? Where we have a lot of lesser conscious AGIs that have superpowers, super intelligence, but is not yet self-aware so that it knows what's right and wrong. At that point, that's the danger part where bad actors could influence it to do the wrong things to society. So, a lot of that might sound like science fiction, but if you look at what's happening in terms of what experts in the industry are saying, a few years ago, people were saying 2050 or so, 2060, before we have programs that can program themselves. Now we're, 2026. Is what the Metaculus, about 1,000 experts in the industry says. People say, when does the first general AI systems are announced? And it used to be, a few years ago, it was 2090, 2080. Now it's 2030. So within the last 3-4 years, the consensus among people in the industry have definitely changed. And then people ask, will they be conscious when they come out, these AGI? And about 66% of people in the industry thinks they will. Right? So at least a little perspective. Now, I know there's a lot of fear out there of AI and the robot apocalypse, right? But I really want to kind of stay a little bit more positive because I think the AGI can actually bring us a lot of benefits that I'm not going to go through all of them. A lot of benefits that can really change the way we live and change our entire social structure and our entire economy because it will make us a lot more productive, it will make us a lot more knowledgeable, and it actually will remove some of the key burdens that we've been fighting against as a species. Now, of course, there are people who say, hey, you know, they're going to take over. You got to, you know, I like this tweet on the left. It says, oh, GPT isn't that impressive. It was the last tweet of mankind, right? So, and you have people like Eliezer Yudkowsky who says, oh, go blow up all of the data centers because we got to stop AI, right? I just need to say, hey, look, there are issues, but we cannot panic, and there are actually somewhere a lot of things that we can do in between, right? There are definitely a real risk, right? I don't think the AI takeover is the real risk. I'm not going to go into too much detail because we're time limited. There are some issues with alignment problem of how do we make sure that when it comes, it's not, it doesn't have different objectives versus humans or has an objective to hurt humans. I actually don't think that's as big of an issue as we think. In fact, I'm a little worried about people overly aligning these intelligence at this point because humans' ethics, human values are different across different parts of the world, across different beliefs, and also it has evolved over the last few thousand years, right? Slavery was a very acceptable thing, whether or not male and female's relationships or their place in the world or the place of children, whether or not parents can sell their children. These were all acceptable things just 100, 200, 300 years ago, right? So do we really want to say that we've reached the epitome of ethics, that we should tell this more enlightened AI what to do? Now, where we actually do have issues that I think are real and is imminent is job displacement and societal instability that could happen when we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of our population be displaced because of the capabilities of this technology. We also have a real issue that is also imminent of misuse, misinformation, manipulation if this technology is taken by the wrong people to actually for self-gain. Now, in terms of jobs, it used to be people were afraid of automation taking over, more manual labor. The reality is that the things that it is going to do better initially are things that are purely white collar, right? So people who are lawyers and mathematicians and programmers, etc., are being replaced. We're 90%. This is a year and a half ago. Or about a year ago, the technology could outdo 90% of humans in all of these tests. And according to the OpenAI kind of chart of the influence of where income versus influence versus exposure or impact, the higher income classes are actually the ones that are going to be most impacted near term. So the safest jobs are actually the carpenters and the dishwashers and the plumbers and so forth. So, I mean, I don't think we all need to be doing those things, but in terms of where it's going, and even those jobs are not going to be that safe for that long because you have devices like these that are coming out or starting to come out that will have human level dexterity. And once you put in that all-knowing brain into one of these devices, it will be able to do and replace a lot of the things that we see as our jobs today. Now, I actually don't see that as a negative. I actually see it as a positive in the sense of it will liberate us from monotonous labor. If you look at what's happened over the last, a couple 100 years, gradually every major country had been going down in terms of hours of labor because we're getting higher productivity. And that productivity is only going to gain. People used to think that, I guess the hunter-gatherers or medieval times, they were working more. They actually weren't. If you went back to history and you look at how much people worked, they were working in an order of about 1,000 hours a year, right? Whereas we're averaging I guess about 2,000 for North America and probably a little bit higher for lesser developed markets. So, but if you look at the trend, is that the higher the productivity, the higher the income, the lesser the hours. If you take that to kind of its extreme, essentially, as productivity goes up, as our level of wealth goes up, our working hours should also go down. So this is kind of where we're going. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I actually think it's a good thing, because now we are freed up to do the things that we want to do, not the things that we have to do. Right? It will allow everybody to be artists, to be able to create and worlds that they want, and have a new canvas to express their imagination. They can maybe do business and do meetings and other things in virtual worlds that they want. They will have a new outlet for their energies. As well, of course, they can go then and entertain themselves and go into fantastical worlds, or create their own fantastical worlds and then invite their friends to join them. So how do we mitigate these risks, right? There's these risks, but the first thing is having a common understanding, educating the public so that we know what's actually possible. We know what are the good and the bad, so that you don't have a unbalanced picture, right? Two is we need to have international regulatory focus on safety. Right now, if you look, everybody's racing to be first. Everybody wants to be the company or the country to get to AGI. And most of them have actually gotten rid of their AI safety teams. It's not probably a great trend. We need to actually have countermeasures and detection tools like we do in the cybersecurity space today. We need kind of anti-bad actor cybersecurity. Very few companies are doing this. I spent 3 years in that industry, and I know that any new technology that comes out, the first people to use it are these bad actors, because they can immediately get an advantage in the market. Right? We need to make sure that we can retrain and retool and provide a safety net for the billions of people that will be displaced, right? So that we don't have people who have nothing to do on the street. And we need to create an open metaverse infrastructure so that people can have a new outlet for their purpose and their energy, a new way to create an intermediary income model, or supplementary income model, in addition to the safety nets that are there. And we also need to have a concerted effort to achieve alignment. Concerted effort, not in the sense of we're all racing to be there first, but a concerted effort in the sense of let's all put our resources together, create one pool of compute, one pool of the most talented individuals in this space, and try to create an AGI that we can all share. Because if any one country or one company wins this race, we will all lose, because that company will be tempted to use it for their own gains. But if we create it and everybody shares that outcome, then we will all share the rewards of whatever's created, all those positive things that we said AGI can bring us. It'll bring us new educational models so that children can learn from super patient, super knowledgeable AGI systems, right? We will not be the Wall-E type of future. We want to be able to create immersive, full-bodied future that actually is healthier. We've actually done studies in this space and has showed that people who are using XR systems are using more calories, are actually more healthy than the people who are just sitting in front of their desk all day. Of course, we need to make sure that
shareholders won't be happy.
This doesn't happen.
It's our job to make them happy. It's our job to make them money.
But once we launch this little baby, they're gonna flip.
So we need to make sure that the marketing industry is not doing what he's doing, which is a device that we will be having on our face for probably more than 10 hours a day, is not used as a marketing manipulation tool, right? Something like what the Ready Player One kind of story was trying to show. So, as these technologies mature, as technology has matured in the last few 100 years or thousands of years, we've actually changed our economic models, right? From hunter-gatherer to pastoral to agricultural to commercial, industrial, and digital in the last few years. We're now getting into this kind of AI plus spatial model, which changes our productivity dramatically. This is not a linear scale, this is a log scale. And at each level, at each point, we have a different limited resource, right? We started out with time was our only limited resource, kind of essentially daytime because we didn't, have lights at the time, and then became livestock and labor and transport and machines and power and fuel. At some point people were talking about software and data. Now we actually go back to the beginning again. We go back to time being our only limited resource when we start to achieve this next development model. Right? And at each model, there's been different economic and different socio-economic and political models that are reactions to what's happening. So what's going to happen next is unclear. If we do our jobs right, it's high potential we're going to create a super abundant type of a society where a lot of the limitations that have kept us from growing goes away. But if we don't do our jobs right, if somebody misuses technology to overly control, we can go backwards very quickly. So I'm sure you guys have seen this picture. So in addition to the evolution of economic models, we humans have also evolved over the last few million years. But over the last 100,000 years or so, we actually haven't changed. Our bodies, our brains really are not very different than the humans of 100,000 years ago. So our meat machine haven't changed, but our technology have continued to change, and our influence on this planet have continued to change. And we will start now to have additional technologies that allow us to be augmented and become smarter, not because of our physical capabilities, but because of connecting with these technologies. Having a super smart AI on your face, like this one right now I have on my face, I can touch it and ask a question and it can answer anything I want, right? That makes me smarter. Very soon it will be able to display it and tell me things through visuals, or be able to use the cameras that are on here to be able to constantly listen and see what I'm talking to and give me real-time advice, right? That's going to make me a lot smarter. At some point, we're going to develop a new form of life that will maybe take it even further. Right? So at different stages in the development of humanity, we've had different priorities. Initially it was just surviving, and then it was tribal dominance, national dominance. Now, very soon we're going to talk about species preservation, and all the fears of the robot takeovers. And then we're going to, I think, move beyond that and say, okay, now how can we move and create consciousness in more places, in more ways, in more types of life forms, making sure that intelligence goes beyond where we are. Right? So I think there's a long path ahead for us to do really great things with the potential of what this technology brings. We should not be seeing these technologies as our opponents, as something that will come and dominate us. We should see them as our children, because we are the reason that they exist, and we should not be afraid of their success, because we are going to have a part of us in this AI. The AI that are trained today is trained on our culture, on our history, on all the things that we've learned, right? And it will then go beyond us, and that's okay, right? Because if your children was more successful than you, you'll be proud of them. You're not going to be afraid of them, right? So back to kind of the beginning. So AI, XR, they are going to work together. They are going to solve each other's problems. XR is going to be, all the content that we need will be generated by AI. XR will be creating the environments that allow people to have that new place to express themselves when their current identity to their occupation goes away, right? So what are just some ideas and tips that we need to think about, right? If you're an AI lab, focus on safety instead of speed. If you're a metaverse platform, focus on creating meaning instead of manipulation. If you're a corporate leader, focus on creating good instead of creating profits or greed. If you're a government, focus on helping the people instead of maintaining power. Right? And I was talking to some friends in the political space, and they say, oh, that's going to be really hard, because all the politicians care about is maintaining power, keeping in their space. And I'm like, but it is so important that they need to change their perspectives. And that was actually one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I feel like if we don't get these messages out to the right people right now, we could head down a very, very dark path. And on individuals, focus on substance. Focus on how do you enrich yourself, enrich your children, versus status and money. So the way to sum it all up is really all about long term. We need to think about the long-term impact of what we do, about all our decisions today, because what we decide as a species in the next 5 years, 10 years, is going to impact the next millennia or longer for our generation, for our species, right? And too many people today are focused on the short term. They can only see the short term because that's how we've been taught. In a scarcity-focused society, short term wins. But in a abundant society, we got to focus on the long term. So I've gotten some, so far pretty good feedback from some great minds in the space, people like Ray Kurzweil and Neil Stevenson, and Eric Brynjolfsson, and Tom Furness, the godfather of VR, and folks, the editor of ZDNet, editor of CNET, head of Media Lab, and Peter Diamandis. These are folks that already said some amazing things who have read the book. So I hope you guys will also get a chance to read it, and look forward to hearing some of your feedback. The book will be available in 2 weeks, and it's also available in digital as well as audio formats. So that's all I have. But I look forward to our panel. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Je vais donc inviter les panélistes à venir sur scène. Donc, votre modérateur ce matin sera Éric Albert, CEO de FI, Alvin, que vous venez d'entendre, bien sûr, Paul Raphael, co-founder and chief innovation officer at Felix Paul Studio, Fabian Barati, co-founder and CEO of Emissive, et puis comme autre panéliste, Bertrand Nepveu, founder of Vervana and partner and co-founder of Triptyq Capital. Donc, on va seulement enlever le podium et ensuite, je vous invite à venir sur scène. Merci.
Thank you so much, Alvin, for the great presentation. I've had the opportunity of reading the book, and Alvin's presentation this morning does great justice. It's a great summary. Obviously, it goes into a lot more details in the book in terms of the various topics. There's additional topics as well. I mean, we're limited on time this morning, so obviously you didn't have a chance to cover everything. But I think it does a really good job at setting the stage for some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So as you saw from Alvin's presentation, there's obviously a tremendous amount of content that we could be talking about this morning. We could go on for hours and hours if we wanted to. We had a preparation session earlier this week, and we agreed that we're going to focus our discussion today on 4 main areas, specifically for the immersive and creative industries, which a lot of people and a lot of representatives are in the room today. So the topics that we're going to be covering today, the metaverse, we need to address the elephant in the room. Alvin touched on it briefly before, but we're going to dive in a little bit more. We're also going to talk about the role of AI in our immersive futures, again, specifically applied to the creative sector. We're going to follow the structure of the book a little bit, and we're going to take a bit of a dystopian view. What do we need to be worried about when we talk about AI and we talk about our immersive futures? Anything that we need to be worried about, if there is. And then we'll take the utopian view. We'll try to leave everybody today on a positive note. So we'll talk about all the possibilities that AI will be opening up in the future for the creative sector. And then obviously we'll wrap up, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So
sorry for not allowing you guys to use French. So.
Do you have a automatic translation in your glasses?
Next version. That's coming.
It's coming. So Alvin touched on the metaverse. He provided his point of view, obviously. And just so you know, Alvin in the book is usually the one that takes the positive approach, the utopian, I guess. But I'd be curious to hear what the other panelists think about the metaverse. Maybe to provide a little bit of context, at CES this year, the Consumer Electronics Show, there was a lot of talk about AI. It was on everybody's lips. But there was barely any mentions of the metaverse. And whenever it was mentioned, it was usually mentioned not in such a positive way. There was a lot of mentions, for example, that the metaverse was dead. It's not a thing anymore. So I would love to hear what you guys think about that specifically. Is the metaverse still a thing? Or is it something, it was the hype from a few years ago, and we moved on to something else?
It's funny, we did a Kickstarter in 2014, and at that time, I had the metavr.se domain. So, the metaverse has been used, Neil was the one who coined the term. So, the problem is marketing, you know? When you have a company as powerful as Facebook, and it's normal, you know, they see their demographic, they see like, there's now, Facebook is more like if you're 40 and more. So, I mean, they need to renew their audience. So that's why Mark Zuckerberg is all in the metaverse, because he sees that as the final platform, to quote Abrash. So yeah, they decided to rebrand to Meta, and then a big buzz happened with that. So it was really cool for maybe a year. And then when the market crashed, I mean, it became, oh, this is related to Facebook, and Facebook also had a hard time in the stock market. So I think it became negative, and the avatar of Zuck was a bit laughable. So I mean, I think that people like to bash when they have the chance, and they did. But I think, like Alvin said in his presentation, the metaverse here to stay is just a transformation from 1D to 2D to 3D, and AI will just be a catalyst for content creation. So anyway, I'll let the others continue.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with a lot of what you said, in that it's inevitable in the sense that all it really is the digital realm catching up with what our experience of reality is, right? So the fact that we've been using screens is just an artifact of the limitations of the technology that existed, which has been screens up until pretty much still today in terms of mass use. So if digital is going to become more natural, more like we experience reality, that's what we're calling the metaverse. You can call it many different things. I think there have been quite a few friction points, definitely marketing, but it's a paradigm shift in the type of content that it is. And therefore, everything needs to evolve to fit the definition of a fully immersive experience, right? Whether it's an interface, whether it's a game, a piece of entertainment, just software, a social network. So there's just so much. You can't just port the thing. I mean, yeah, you can put it on a floating window, and that's an easy win, and good for Apple to bring basically the majority of their iOS apps and iPadOS apps into the Vision Pro. But for native content to exist, it takes so many people to jump in and to figure this stuff out, right? And you need, of course, the hardware to evolve as well. Now you end up with a chicken and egg problem where you don't have the audience to justify everyone jumping in, right? And so that's why I think it's been so slow and start and stop, because there's excitement, there's hype, people jump in, they realize, oh, wow, it's been another 18 months and we still haven't reached any sort of critical mass, right? So that keeps happening. AI, I think, is probably the only way we reach that critical mass in a way that doesn't, make us go through another 5 cycles of winters and summers of the metaverse. Yeah.
And Fabian, maybe even Alvin, do you think the fact that the metaverse was very closely associated with some of the Web3 technologies, whether it be NFTs or crypto, which sort of all tanked over the last couple of years, do you think that is having an effect on the perception of the public towards the metaverse and the negative perception that might be coming out?
For sure. I mean, because we saw all the bad news, all of the FTXs and the Gemini, whatever, all of these issues where people associated scams and negativity to the term. And the reality is actually, I think blockchain technology has value, and it will play some role in the future metaverse, but not in the way that it's been positioned today, and not for monkey pictures or whatever, crypto coins that people are just hyping up to make a quick dollar, right? But it will be an important part of ensuring that we have cross-world portability or cross-border portability. There's going to be value there. As we essentially move between apps to moving between worlds, we need something to help us, right? But most of the metaverse systems out there today, and most of the Web3 systems, are actually closed systems today. We need to move from a closed model to a more open model.
Just to quickly add on that, I think now we see, especially with AI, that like data is the new oil. And right now, just to get access to a platform at zero, we give our data for free. But I think in the future, your data will be gold, and technology like NFTs will be a way for you to like opt in or opt out if you give your data and monetize it.
Fabien?
Yeah, I also think that those are tools that may enhance a possible metaverse, but not necessarily necessary. If we go back to the the term defined in the Stevenson's book, metaverse are persistent words, maybe a bit managed by AI, and that you can access through XR, VR. Persistent words already exist, and they can already be accessed by with VR, not like in a very wide way, because I think it will be possible through new devices, lighter, less expensive. That's going to happen very quickly as well. So, in my opinion, metaverse is also. I also agree it's going to happen very soon, as it is defined in the book.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like there is alignment that the metaverse will be happening, or at least some form of the metaverse, and the hype cycle that was created by some of the companies over the last few years, that's not necessarily the metaverse that we're going to be seeing in the future. And I'm referring specifically to to Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the metaverse that you talked about before. So moving on to the next topic, and maybe just to set the stage for when we talk about the utopian and the dystopian, I want us to have a bit of a conversation around what the impact of AI specifically will have on our immersive futures and immersive experiences in general. So just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen technology evolve extremely rapidly, whether it be on the AI front with Sora coming out, you referenced it in your presentation, the Apple Vision Pro coming out over the last couple of weeks. Things are moving on at a very accelerated pace. We have the luxury of having two people who are contributing to the hardware that's making this possible. Bert, who was a big contributor to the Apple Vision Pro, and obviously Alvin with HTC, one of the bigger players in the immersive device space. What's your take on where this technology, specifically on the devices, what's your take on where this is going to take us, and what possibilities will it open up in the near term?
Great question. I mean, competition is good, that's why I think capitalism is the most efficient way to create value right now. It has its plus and minuses, of course, but I think, when Apple enters a market, people notice. Could it have been better? Yes. There's lots of drawbacks with the current headset, but I think we already see that on the OS side, because Apple, they're very strong in the ecosystem. If you have your MacBook, it will take in a frictionless way your screen and make it on the Vision Pro and everything. Like you see Meta already, they're making changes to their OS. So I think it's very positive. Hardware is hard. So this will also put pressure, I think, on Qualcomm to improve their chipset, which is great. So I think competition makes everything better. And on top of that, when you have Sora and AI, you see all the possibilities. I think it's all about talent at the same time. A lot of the talent, they go in AI right now because it's very exciting. But I think we'll see a merge between AI and the metaverse, or whatever you want to call it. And when you have talented people that works on hard problem, that's where everybody benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually don't see, because you hear a lot right now about, it's a war between Meta and Apple, and the reality is, whether it's Apple or Meta or HTC, we're actually playing at different parts of the market. And it's a complementary relationship where right now, a $4,000 product will never be a mass market product, right? They're right now creating a halo product. And that halo product lifts the awareness level everywhere, because I'm sure the last 3 weeks you've seen in almost every website, every periodical, media, they're all talking about it. So it's great. It makes the topic top of mind again, which for the last year or so have actually gone away because of the kind of over awareness of AI. Now, because they're playing at that kind of halo market, HTC is more on the B2B market, and Meta is really more at the consumer market. Everybody has their role, and we're all progressing together. And so, in fact, I think Apple coming out is going to be great for business for us and for Meta and for Qualcomm and whoever, right? So it is a rising tides raising all boats kind of scenario right now.
And it's interesting you mentioned that. I mentioned it before. At CES, there was barely any talks about VR, or when they were talking about VR, it was really about industrial applications and training and stuff like that. Since the release of the Apple device, I was at a conference or a couple of conferences in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago. It seems like VR is back on everybody's mind, or spatial computing, if we use Apple's lingo. But it seems like it's cool again to start talking about AR and VR. Paul, Fabien, maybe a question more specifically for you guys, and obviously feel free to jump in, but bit of a philosophical question. Do you think AI, or generative AI specifically, can be creative?
Yeah, so this is a philosophical question. I would answer yes, because in the end, an agent, a digital agent, is doing some digital calculations to go to an objective, to go to a target. This is a bit what we are also doing in our brains. This is like chemical, electric signals that can be simulated also digitally, I believe. So in the end, if we can create a digital agent, should be able to create as well.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we are remixing machines as well, right? We take our life experience, our inspirations, and we create new things. But I think the way what's the real challenge, as my title is a Chief Innovation Officer, and it's been many different things at the studio, and I might as well stick with that one for now. But that means that essentially I'm responsible for figuring this stuff out for the company. But the truth is, to me, it for the time being, it's certainly an accelerator. So especially the last we were working on a project that we began about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years. And initially, there was nothing. AI was not a part of it at all. I mean, we were maybe at some point thinking, oh, maybe some kind of, interactive ChatGPT-like, element to it. Eventually, it became a tool to accelerate some of the creation, right? Some of the two-dimensional, three-dimensional creation. And I see that as the project reaches its end, it's going to be a 3-year project by the time it's released. It will have more and more contribution from AI. Now, I can see that, I can project up until a certain point what the role of the creator will be as AI becomes more and more prevalent in the creative process. And then it hits kind of an event horizon where you're like, okay, you really just need to be thinking on your feet more and more and more as time progresses, because once, I think media that has existed and that is abundant, that has existed for a long time, that is abundant, are going to be the first things that are going to be simulated from beginning to end, right? There's a rich history of cinema, right, from which you could generate potentially a masterpiece of a film using AI with some human contribution, and eventually without, with some prompts and some basically just like reacting to the audience itself, right? content that has less samples, right, is going to take a little longer, right? I think the feedback loop is going to be so tight that even that, like cinematic, like virtual reality, like what we've been doing, there certainly isn't 100 years of rich history of that, right? And arguably, we're still figuring out how to do that right? So that's going to take a little longer. Eventually, though, as a creator, I can see our roles becoming more about being creators, right? Basically curating the hooks, and how do you inject meaning, right, into something, right? Because there's no, it's not just about getting someone off, right? And I don't just mean that like sexually. I just mean like, as when you're watching a film or listening to music, something that's pushing your buttons, right? And that's going to get, into a feedback loop that's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. So where do you go in? Where do you insert yourself to make that meaningful? Even that eventually, I think, is going to get automated, right? And then maybe the last thing, I think, and we talked a bit about this yesterday, there's going to be some value to the human creator, that's going to maybe have some kind of premium for a while, where kind of like you're gonna care about who made this, right? And it might carry some cachet or premium. Until the quality of what a human can make just completely pales in comparison. Like I'm projecting further, but further it may not be that far. It's hard to say. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting and challenging, and it's mysterious. It's very mysterious. I find like what we're going to have to become to keep doing what we're doing. Because the main reason I'm doing what I'm doing is yes, because I enjoy it, but because I wanted to have a positive impact on people and the world. And so I could imagine eventually it will be about being part of the people that are trying to keep this thing aligned, in the sense, not just aligned as in it's not evil, but aligned in the sense that it's actually actively good and enriching, right?
So maybe I add one little point to that. There's a term in the AI world called hallucinations, right? It's when AI makes mistakes, but comes up with answers that maybe we see as mistakes. But in the physical world, if humans made those same mistakes, we would call them creative, right? So it's really more of how the perspective we take on what creativity really is. It's coming up with things that may or may not actually be real, right? And I think it's innate in AI devices, particularly neural network systems, that they are able to make things that were not complete replications, that they are creating something original or new, right? So by definition, that actually, I think, is creative. Now, to Paul's point, though, I think for at least some period of time, people will actually still prefer to say, I want some level of creativity, even if the quality is good. Because I'm sure there are human-made, desks, and then there are machine-made desks. And people will say, I'll pay more for the human-made one, even if the quality is not as good as the machine-made one, because there's, somebody put their heart and soul and their craft into it. And I think we will still have some level of value as, human machines in creating new content. But the two need to coexist, right? Because most people are right now, probably most of our furniture, most of our machines, most of our whatever we wear or use are actually machine-made, and content will probably be going that same path.
Just at 30 seconds, super quick, to add on, like, people think, mistakes are made when it's creativity. Like AlphaGo, when they train it on, like, so many games and everything, and played against a champion, and that's the example I give to say that AI can be creative. It did what was look as a mistake, something never any humans did, and actually it was a strategy and made him win. So, 37. Exactly.
So I think clearly this is one of the topics that we could gone on for an hour, but being mindful of time, And your last intervention, Alvin, I think leads us well into the next point, which is the dystopian point of view. So I'm going to read, here we are. I'm going to read a quote from the book because I don't want to give him, I want to make sure I give him the right quote. So John Favreau is quoted in the book as saying, "The fear is that the combined power of AI and VR could greatly reduce the opportunities for apprenticeships in the arts, which in turn could reduce the number of artists and creators. The fear he expresses that the combined power of AI and VR could greatly reduce the opportunities." So basically, do you think that this fear is founded based on the conversation we just had in terms of the opportunities it could open up, or is it overblown?
If I see try to foresee the very short term for emissive, I would say that it will be a tool to help create our next experiences, and then it will displace some of the creative jobs at one point, necessarily, I would say. And then it will not be in the production phase, but in the experience phase, be able to adapt to the audience in real time. And then, not only to adapt, but create in real time, taking into account the feedback, any feedback from the audience. So I'm not really answering the question here, because it's really, we can see a lot of dystopian futures, but I don't know if it's good or bad in our specific case in the short term, because seeing the long term is quite difficult, I would say. For me, the big thing about AI and is in the mid-term, like very few years, when a lot of jobs will be displaced, is that governments has to be very quick to act right now, to be prepared. So there are not like revolutions that, because people will be out of a job very quickly.
Yeah, well, which is, I guess, the biggest problem is, how fast have governments historically been to adapt to anything, right? This is going to be faster than anything ever and more complex than anything ever. So if you want to be dystopian, you just don't need to look much further than there. Like, how can we hope that a grasp will be, that this will be graspable and on time, and that the right decisions are made to put those safeguards in, taking into consideration all the power grabs that are going to be happening at the same time, and the conflicting forces that are going to want more or less freedom. So yeah.
Maybe as a sub-question, and you guys can address it, we often see regulation, to your point, Paul, as an innovation killer. Do you think that governments, assuming they have the ability to and they can keep up, do you think that governments or other regulating bodies should be putting guardrails in place to avoid the dystopian future from becoming a reality?
We need to find the right balance. Like, I'm not against rules, but too much rules because, like a small percent, like, I don't like red tape. People know me, I hate red tape. And usually red tape is because someone abused the system. But should everybody pay because 1% of the population abuse the system? I don't think so. I think we need good actors who can outbalance bad actors. And it's a bit like that now in like Web 2.0, where it's platform plays. Mostly them are based on dopamine. They want you to stay as long as possible on the platform. And yes, the same thing will happen in the metaverse. They'll try to keep you in. But there's tools right now, like if you have kids, screen time is almost a must right now to like help regulate younger people and give good habits. But even adults, there's abuse possibilities. So I think, yes, we need rules, but at the same time, I think that companies who give the best products and help you maybe achieve a right balance in your life will win. So again, I think competition is good, having more and more option, and people naturally will go towards the solution that gives them happiness, let's say.
So I'm going to kind of cover both the questions. First is, is having AI and going to reduce the concept of apprenticeship and learning from apprenticeship. I actually think it's the opposite, because instead of having, let's say, a few 100,000 people who are creating XR content or 3D content today, we will have 8 billion people that has the possibility to create content, and they will learn from that experience. They may not be taught by a master-student relationship, but they may be taught by a tool AI master. Right? And now, instead of discovering among a pool of 100,000 people, you're now discovering among a pool of 8 billion people, which actually I think in the long run could be a much greater level of creativity unleashed. Now, on the question of regulation, I also agree with you that you can't overregulate, because if you overregulate, it does stifle innovation. But in this particular case, particularly on the AI side, if we don't have some level of regulation and people get into that race condition where they have no, I guess, sense of worry about safety or the ramifications of misuse or the ramifications of their technology being misused, then there's no internal management of that problem. And having the regulation also allows you to decide how much you want to enforce the regulation. But having the fear of the regulation will say, okay, well then, when I'm managing, do I release this product yet or not? Should I test it a little bit more or not? Having some level of regulation allows the management teams of these companies to consider at a deeper level, right? So, it's a balance. But having no regulation, I think, creates an automatic race condition.
One kind of fascinating concept that I often think about is, let's say 8 billion people, or however many people we will be by then, probably 8, probably won't be that much more by the time this happens, but let's say 8. And we go from having, let's take again a mature art form like cinema, or instead of having this level of quality as an average with spikes of brilliance, right? All of a sudden, you have, the bar is like here. The norm is beyond today's spikes of brilliance, right? And then maybe there you have also spikes too, because you have either, I don't even know how spikes happen, but let's say you do. But at some point you're like, okay, what is the limit of human appreciation? Like, at which point is like everything just so good and perfect that you actually normalize, and you've reached the limit of what a human being can even, that's a scary thought to me. It's like, where we're like, oh, it's like yin yang, right? Like, if there's no more assuming, we don't crash, right? Like, it's like, that's kind of mind blowing to me.
Spoiled brats,
What's that?
We all become spoiled brats.
Exactly. Like, what happens then? Like, yeah.
So I think that's a good segue into the utopian point of view. Again, in the spirit of respecting the time, I'm going to try to focus the conversation more around, and you touched on this in your presentation, Alvin, the opportunities and the possibilities that open up in the education sector as a result of AI immersive. And I would love to hear you, Paul and Fabien, on the educational aspects of the Infinite and of KOps. Because people that have done both those experiences have brought up the educational aspects of both experiences.
Okay, so I think AI and, of course, VR are very good to create a context. And that means create engagement, involvement for the audience, and therefore better understanding, better knowledge. And so this is what we were trying to focus on in our immersive expedition. And this gives, I think, a very good educational layer. And I think this is exactly what is very strong with those technologies, plus all the social, possible social interactions. They can be real social interactions, meaning with the touch feeling, but also, of course, remotely. I think this is also very important and very present in those technologies. I mean, we have to keep that, yeah, I think those are the main points. Education and socializing is very strong with those technologies.
Paul?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to the reason we even got into VR and immersive storytelling was, before we were fascinated by the quality, the immersive quality certain art had. Some films, some immersive theater, a concert can be an immersive experience. How that has this kind of awe-inspiring quality, right? That opens you up in a way that you're not open in something that's less immersive, right? It's almost like a transcendental kind of feeling when you're really opened up and in immersion, right? And so, as storytellers, we found that an incredible state to have an audience in, to the point where we went from, like I said earlier, a medium that has 100 years of heritage and that is well understood, that how you suspend disbelief and tell stories in film, versus VR, where we were basically starting from scratch. So we were like, we're willing to let all of that go because the potential of even rudimentary immersive storytelling seems so high, right? Let alone once we get to understand it better. And I think that is, these states are not just entertaining and maybe enriching for the soul, but they are profoundly educational, right? Like the infinite is not an educational experience. It's not even a museum, a science center like kind of. It wasn't meant to be, But yes, there's so much information in there, and I think even if you create something that isn't a documentary, as long as it's rich in meaning or anything else, I feel like the pipe, the bandwidth of substance that you've got to communicate with is just so much broader and leaves so much more of a mark, right? People tend to remember immersive experiences more like they would reality, right? And therefore, I think it's more impactful and they hold on to it better. And it's, when you think about the educational system, you obviously have a wide range of quality in the way people learn, but the fact is that it's mostly very abstracted the way you learn, right? Whether it's someone telling you something with maybe slides, maybe videos, it could be a book. Of course, you can transmit a lot that way, but to be able to communicate with basically all the senses that the human being has, and not just, a film has sight and sound, but once you're in that, rather than just looking at it, the spatial aspect of it makes it that much more impactful, right? And then you can add other senses, of course, like physical touch. And so, yeah.
So the topic of education and immersive tech is actually something I've been very passionate about for a long time, because I did my initial studies on this 33 years ago. And it is clear that in a multi-central learning environment, immersive learning environment, you will learn better. You will learn more, you will remember more, you will test better, you will be more focused, you will be more excited, right? And there's just multiple data that shows that across the board. And the thing that I think now with the combination of AI plus immersive tech, it allows you to do is to create an environment where you have the optimal way of learning for anybody in the world, no matter where they are. Well, you guys are lucky folks. I was very lucky that I moved from China to the US when I was 9 and had an ability to get into an education system that allowed me to have some of the best professors in the world, right? Not everybody has that. But if you can create a virtual classroom where you have an AI teacher that knows everything, is fully patient, knows your learning speed, adjusts its learning process to your mode of learning, it can maximize everybody's innate ability. So I'm sure you guys have heard that Einstein his estimated IQ is like 160, which you think, wow, that's 4 standard deviations away. That's super rare. The reality is that 4 standard deviation, there's actually 180,000 people in the world right now that are 160 or higher IQ. But how many Einsteins in a generation do we find? I mean, we've had 1 in 100 years, right? Maybe we have a few other folks that are in that realm, but essentially once a generation, we maybe have somebody to that level of intelligence. It just means that there's a lot of people out there that could be that, but we just haven't found them because they probably didn't get to go through the right education system, didn't have the right support people to really find their opportunity. And I feel like with these kind of technologies that we have today, we can create a virtual university or education system that allows everybody in the world to have Nobel Prize winning professors. Right? That's going to change our amount of innovation that we come out with, both as humans and also as what AI will augment.
Yeah, quickly to just put a layer on top of that, like I agree with everything you said, and like I like to read biographies or watch documentaries, like more efficient for me. And you see like great, like Leonardo da Vinci at tutors and everything. So I think like, yes, you need to be bright, but also you need the right environment to flourish. And me, like without knowing that I was dyslexic, I was like, yeah, reading is really, it requires me a lot of energy. So I went into gaming and learned a lot of life, how it's working like with games. And now now that I'm older, I have a son who's also dyslexic and everything. I'm like, I think gamification of like education would be amazing. Right now everything is optimized because we have limited resources. A book is a great way to disseminate information because you print it, people can read it, but it's not for everyone. And the school system is the same thing. You have one professor for 40 students. So I think with AI, you'll have your personalized tutor and learn your own way. So I think it's going to be a very exciting future. We just need to find the best way to do it. And sure, hardware now is impeding that a bit because it's expensive, but with time, it will come down in price.
I think it's a great way to move on to the conclusion. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So maybe in closing, and I would love to hear each of you, 30 seconds. How do we, as an organization or as an industry, the XR sector, make sure that we build on everything that we've learned and we have a positive outcome at the end of all this, and we keep the dystopian scenarios out of view?
Okay, I think so. All the ideas that Alvin shared are good ideas. I still think we have to brace for the uprising of AI at one point. But being knowledgeable of all the dystopian ideas for years in the sci-fi movies and books, we kind of already are prepared of those ideas, and so maybe we can steer towards the good outcomes. So this is really on all of us to be prepared on all the level of a society now. Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a fine answer.
Yeah. I mean, I do think we need to, we've seen a ton of dystopian versions of the future. I haven't seen many stories about a utopian or protopian future, right? That there are fewer. There's just a lot, And if there was, we've seen the warnings, and even, there are probably warnings that have yet to be, imagined, right? Like possible pitfalls. But I think we also need to have more examples of what this could be, and I think, a lot of what's in your book points in that direction. We're working on an experience that could be argued as a protopian kind of experience, and that's very intentionally so. It's so that there's a lot of doom and gloom. Yes, there's a lot of promise, but we need examples of what could be, so that we can aspire and actually come up with what it reasonably could become, right? And spend more and more time thinking about that, because we will manifest what's in our heads, and if all that's in our heads if what's in our heads is mostly negative, we're probably just going to end up manifesting that.
As you can imagine, I'm very optimistic about this space, but I see a lot, and I like to debate online with naysayers. But I think people who think it's going to be dystopian, they just shut down and start, and usually they don't get involved in the conversation. So I would say just the more people are curious about this and that get involved, will make sure that it's a positive future. If some people say, oh, no, this is just a fringe movement, and then I think that's when it can be dangerous.
So on the question of dystopian versus utopian, there definitely is not very many utopian novels. But I guess the one you would point in fact, I had this specific conversation with Neil Stephenson at lunch, and I said, hey, why aren't there that many? Because utopian stories are just not exciting. Everything's so good. There's no challenge, right? But he said, the only one I can think of is actually Star Trek. And for those of you who watch Star Trek, you can see that they are at least Roddenberry trying to create a utopian future. And the thing to note that is what started that society onto that track was meeting the Vulcans, right? Was the humans meeting the Vulcans. So it required an alien species to bring rationality and intelligence. We're lucky because we're actually creating our own alien, right? We're creating the Vulcans. We're creating this more advanced species in the form of AI. And it actually will help us set into that next phase if we manage it well. So I think this future is possible, and we are at the verge of it. Another potential one that is a utopian sci-fi is actually the Ian M. Banks series, the Culture series. If you guys do have a chance, I would highly recommend those as well. There's a few dark things in there, but it really is the symbiosis of AI and super AI with human intelligence and working together to solve issues. In terms of what do we do short term, I actually had a section in the back of my book about this. So if you guys do have time, and in fact I shared it with Eric, so he is able to distribute to you guys a few pages that are, depending if you're a policymaker or a company leader or a parent, what you should do, what you can do to help bend it towards the positive. So.
And it's a great ending to the book because it does provide some insights and some, I guess it ends the book in a very positive way in terms of how guardrails can be put in place to try to protect the future and make sure that we don't fall into the dystopian point of view. Maybe in closing, then we'll open it up in questions. This is another quote from the book. I believe it's from Churchill. The cut and paste didn't make it. But now this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. Thought it was an interesting way to end today's conversation. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take some questions.
I kind of want to address the dystopian thing a little bit, but with a completely different context. I mean, the zeitgeist of the moment is the smartphone, and what we've seen for the last 20 years is extraordinary evolution in terms of technology, but we've also seen the extension of offshoring and supply chains to an incredible amount. And that's the moment we're in now, that looks very different. It makes me think, about 50 years ago, we had the oil shock, which completely turned the economy over. Prices went up by 3 times, etc. We're talking 73. And there was a very important impact of that too, which meant there was, because of a change in the supply chains, there was a massive consolidation within the oil industry, and behemoth industries, and the largest oil company in the world was created about then, Aramco. Fast forward to now, and what we've seen is creation of foundries in principally Taiwan and Korea. We've also seen supply chains of different technologies, German, Dutch, British, incredibly complex stuff, but the foundries are totally central. There is an idea of creating foundries in the United States right now, but good luck with that, especially if you're looking at the 3NM chip. So given the instability around the Taiwan Strait and what could happen in the last few years, let me bring it to the last point is, what we have is two behemoths in this right now, Meta and Apple. And they've got to be good actors, we're told. Well, some stuff came out of the hearings around what had been happening with Meta. Apple has been trying to push screen time saving apps off their app store. I'm not sure we can count on them being good actors. And with the other issue of what's going to happen once those supply chains shrink and become difficult and those resources dry up, I mean, my question is, what is your game plan for that?
Yeah, solving the world's problems, no problem. I'll do that in 30 seconds. So I'll try to address some of those issues, or at least not address, but at least discuss. So I actually spent the last 18 years in China, and I work for a Taiwanese company. And I spent 8 years with Intel in the semiconductor space. So I know that industry a little bit, and some of the tensions there. I actually don't think a lot of the doomsayers talking about China invading Taiwan is something that's imminent and something that is actually likely. If the issues right now is actually the provocation from the U.S. by putting military there, by selling weapons there, trying to provoke action, whereas China itself, the government, has no real intent to do that. And if you actually listen to what Deng Xiaoping said back in the 70s, is he said, if Taiwan agrees to come back to China, we can give them 1,000 years to do that, as long as they just agree to do that. So the issue right now is actually whether or not Taiwan declares direct independence, which is a real issue. And right now, even with the new party elections, they decided that they don't want to make it that overt. So I don't think that the issue is as dire as people say. On the supply chain issues in general, I agree with you. I don't think building fabs in the U.S. is very likely, and will probably not be the answer. But I don't even know if that's the biggest bottleneck today, in the sense of we're now seeing that AI can actually large AIs can train small AIs and perform very well, probably 90-95% as well as a large AI system. So, and you're going to be able to get things to the edge. So even things running very soon on your phones will be able to perform things that used to take a giant data center. So we should be able to increase the efficiency of these solutions. On whether it's Apple and Meta are going to be good players, I think this is why we talked about having some level of regulation. The government does need to step in. I don't think they're well informed yet, because when I hear the hearings and the things that are being asked, it's clear that the policymakers are not well educated in the space, which is why I actually wrote the book, because I wanted them to have that background and see the positives that could happen as well as the negatives. And hopefully, it gets into some of the right hands, and they do create more intelligent policies. Now, there are actually things that are in debate today in the AI Act in Europe, and the White House letter on AI here, and China's got multiple policies. So there are things that are coming out that will at least start to address some of these things, and I'm hopeful that people will get smarter over time, and things will become more managed, right? But there's no silver bullet today.
Well, thank you for your insights. I've found it quite interesting. My question is more to do with generational, looking forward, maybe beyond what we're doing now, and perhaps a couple of generations in the future, where I mean, the AI engines right now are using what is effectively the sum of human knowledge in order to generate content and make decisions and take over as experts in our world. Now, that's just going to increase with time to the point where, like Paul was saying, where they would, in terms of the media that is created and produced for us to consume, it gets so good that it has the potential to take the creator out of the loop. And my question is, and you can see the same thing happening in science and technology, where the engine becomes so powerful that you really don't need a human involved in the process anymore. And I also am firmly a believer in the utopian part, but with maybe a dark hue, which is that, yes, it has the potential to increase the quality of life in the planet exponentially, but then my question is really, what's the incentive for creativity in a generation or two from now? Like, who is going to be generating that new content that's going to be feeding the engine when there's no real interest or need to do it anymore?
Well, I guess you have to separate two things. One of them is how, the question of income, I guess, right? So we're going to put that aside because I don't know the answer to that. As a creator, I have as much fun creating as I have it consume. Yeah. No, I'm talking about now, but I want it's in an attempt to answer your question. I enjoy consuming content, and I guess the closest thing I can imagine to what the AI, kind of future where you kind of generate instantaneously content that is custom designed for you is dreaming, right? Dreaming, or even I've spent years like lucid dreaming, like actively training and basically for a while like I could almost lucid dream on command, right? I can't do that anymore, sadly, but I feel like that was kind of a glimpse at a bit of what that might be like. And honestly, that was amazing. It was some of the most incredible experiences of my life, even though they're not real, right? So if everyone can do that, I mean, it goes back to my real fear is not like the incentive to create, because I think there will always be there will be an incentive to create until we reach some kind of peak where will we build in flaws just so that peaks can exist, right? So you can have modulation, right? Otherwise you just have a flat line, right? And then it'll be like, how far can you push it? How yeah, well, who's going to push it? It's going to be probably, if we're far enough into that future, it's going to be a combination of what you want and the system, right? And so the artist in between is definitely going to be there for a while until it gets embedded into the system, right? How far is that? Like, I really don't know. Is that, well, is it within the next few years? Is it within our lifetimes? Is it beyond? Some would say it's way closer than we that we would maybe like, because I mean, part of it is a fascinating thought and something I would love to try tomorrow, but then it also comes with such existential and philosophical questions that I think we can only hope to be fast enough to assimilate as it comes onto us, so that it's not just kind of like an avalanche where we're just kind of like completely like subjected to it, rather than somewhat bringing it about with some agency.
Thanks. So maybe a little to add to that is, I think human nature is actually built to be curious and explore, right? I mean, we grew out of some apes that came out of Africa like 7-8 million years ago, 6-7 million years ago, and they went to all corners of the world, and they found places that even the harshest places, human found a place to live. And the ability to explore beyond your comfortable spot is actually part of what's in our nature. And right now, we live in a very comfortable spot, as you said, but I think very soon we're going to start thinking, okay, now we've gotten what we need out of this planet, we'll probably start looking outside. And your satisfaction will not necessarily come from just creating the next TikTok video or making the next movie. It may be saying, I want to find the next world out there. I want to go and see places that no one has ever gone before. Right. And I think we're going to find new challenges that maybe the current AI couldn't give us, and that we don't even know what it is yet. So I'm hopeful that we can move beyond some of the current limitations because we now have new tools.
Just the last little thing on top of that, you almost have to think backwards at how did we become human beings, right? And before that, what our consciousness was like, right? And what or what it's like for the animals around us or other conscious beings. And it's like, okay, this acceleration, is going to push us possibly to some other thing, right? I think of an upper limit because it's an event horizon, right? But is there an upper limit? There hasn't been an upper limit up until now. Why would there be one? If the universe is infinite, couldn't mind be infinite, and its capacity to, enjoy or be driven or like all these things? What is the upper limit? Are we going to find it and cap it and that'll be it, or is it just going to keep going? And that's actually very fascinating.
Je remercie beaucoup notre orateur pour cette vision schumpeterienne très intéressante. Moi, je voudrais poser une question sur la place de l'artiste, la vision de l'artiste dans cet avenir. Je me rappelle plus de la planche qui montrait les job displacement. Est-ce que l'artiste est amené à disparaître? Et puis, dans tous les cas aussi, ce que j'entendais, c'était les définitions de la création. J'entends beaucoup l'originalité et la nouveauté. Aujourd'hui, ce qu'on demande à un artiste, c'est d'être créatif, et la créativité se définit par la simple originalité. L'innovation, la nouveauté, c'est autre chose, c'est de l'innovation. Alors, est-ce que l'avenir de l'artiste, c'est de se définir comme quelqu'un d'original, de créatif et d'innovant? Est-ce qu'on doit aller vers un nouveau mode de fonctionnement artistique? Merci.
So maybe very quickly for you, Alvin, and then maybe we can ask Paul and Fabien to answer as well. But referring to the slide that you had that shows some of the job displacements, artists specifically, which side of the chart were they on? Were they more on the less risk of being displaced or on the more risk of being displaced? And then the second aspect, maybe Paul and Fabien, you can answer more from an artistic point of view, but was more around what the point of view of the artist is in terms of what they bring into the equation, essentially. Very, very summarized, but it gives you an idea.
So on art, I guess the things that are going to be most easily replaced are things that are what's called scalable roles, right? Things that you can do once and replace a lot of places. So actually, art, commercial art particularly, is something that is very scalable because you can put in something into Midjourney today and you can make a beautiful picture that used to, all the pictures I had in my presentation were done by AI. Right? I used to have to wait weeks and weeks for an artist to help me render something, and then I would say, oh, this is not right, and then it would go back and forth. I can do it in a minute now. Right? But the things that are going to be, from an artist perspective, the things that are going to be less scalable are those masterpieces. Right? So those things will continue to be more valuable because they are things that are just out of the norm. So I think there's still potential, but only for things that are particularly special. I think the ones that are going to be successful, just like today, I mean, if you look at most artists, they're starving artists, right? That's a term, right? Because most of them are starving, and same with actors, and same with musicians. So the ones that really break out are the ones that win, and I don't think that's going to change.
I mean, it's kind of like what we've been talking about in that there's a today, there's a short term, there's a medium term, and then there's I have no idea. Today, yes, Midjourney. Tomorrow, kind of average but good things of every kind, almost, right? even the masterpieces I see eventually becoming part of that system. I think that the mystery, or what I'm trying to understand or figure out and hopefully be a part of, is what does the interface become to be an artist, right? Like today, it's your painter, it's the paintbrush. Your filmmaker, it's the camera and the editing and the VFX and the actors and all the things. And if it's music, it's the instruments or whatever it is, right? AI is coming into there and taking some of these things and helping them or replacing them, right? Once, at some point, the tools become completely different, right? And the role changes, right? And that's going to happen progressively. And I can only project so far, but I have a sense of what it's going to be. But you're going to want to probably, I mean, again, the real thing, the real painting by a real human being is going to have a worth, right? Because it's made by a human being, right? In parallel to that is going to be the world that is generated by thoughts, or even just by showing up, right? You show up and just like your Spotify playlists plays you the song that you know, that is right for the time of day and based on your listening, the world that you're going to enter and the entertainment and everything is just, it might be on, you know, auto-suggest mode, right? And then, but who's designed this thing, you know, like, and who's making, you know, who's curated, like up until a point, you know, there's going to be some human input, right? I don't know how far it goes and what it's going to become, right? But like, that's where I'm going to try to be. I'm going to try to surf that wave until it dissolves into something that I just can't, that either no longer needs me or that I just can't imagine, right? Right now, at least. So yeah, you're going to have to be very creative as to how you are creative as all of this kind of evolves, I think.
On that note, did you want to add something,
Yeah,
Bert?
just quickly, like 30 seconds. To answer our question, I think to create a masterpiece, you need innovation to express your creativity. Because like, let's say you think of something crazy, and you're like, I cannot do it right now. I need to innovate. And I think that's why like Space Odyssey, like 2001, or even Star Wars or The Matrix, they created new technology to really show what they had in mind.
Thank you to the panelists for bringing your insight and your expertise, but also for speculating on what the potential futures, our potential immersive futures might hold for us going forward. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your participation.
And thank you, Eric, for hosting us and for great moderation.
Thank you.
And Myriam as well.
Merci tout le monde.